Timothy lost everything in one night. The storm didn't just destroy his restaurant, it erased his father's legacy, his future, every dream he'd built brick by brick. When the bank arrived with eviction papers and rain poured through his broken roof, a trembling homeless man stumbled through the door begging for shelter. Timothy hadn't eaten in 2 days. He had one meal left, one final portion of his father's signature dish that he'd been saving for himself. What he did next defied all logic. But when demolition crews arrived the next morning to tear it all down, black SUVs lined the street, and the homeless man stepped out in a suit so sharp it made the whole block go silent. 1 week after the storm, Timothy sat in what used to be his father's restaurant. Shattered glass crunched under his boots. Half the ceiling had collapsed, exposing twisted beams and tangled wiring. The framed photo of his father at opening day hung crooked. The glass cracked right down the middle, splitting his father's proud smile in two. He remembered his father's words. Cooking isn't just about food, son. It's about dignity. When you feed someone, you're telling them they matter. Rain still fell through the gaping holes in the roof, drumming against metal pots scattered across the floor. On the one dry table sat the insurance denial letter, predatory clause highlighted in yellow. Timothy's hands trembled as he stared at the financial breakdown scribbled on a napkin. 0. Less than 0, actually, if he counted what he still owed. The knock came like a judge's gavel, 3 hard, deliberate strikes that echoed through the hollow restaurant. A man stood on the threshold in an expensive charcoal coat, hair slicked back with too much product. Bradley Hewitt, Hewitt Development Group. I believe you know why I'm here. Bradley pushed past Timothy, his nose wrinkling at the smell of mold. Look around. There's nothing left to save here. You're holding on to a corpse and calling it a business. Timothy's jaw clenched. This restaurant has been in my family for 30 years. My father built. Your father, Bradley interrupted, pulling out papers. Let me be frank. Businesses like yours never last in neighborhoods like this. The way he said you people hung in the air like smoke. Bradley slapped the papers onto the table. Official eviction notice. 24 hours to vacate. Tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., demolition crews arrive. The smart move would have been to sell 6 months ago when I made you that offer. Should have taken it when you had the chance, Mr. Matthews. Pride is expensive. The door slammed behind him. Timothy stood frozen, staring at the eviction notice. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., everything his father built would be rubble and dust. Thunder rumbled. The rain intensified, hammering against the roof like fists demanding entry. The door creaked open. A gust of wind pushed it wider, and a figure stumbled through, hunched, dripping, shaking so hard Timothy could hear his teeth chattering. The man was old, weathered, with hollow eyes sunk deep into his skull. His threadbare coat was soaked completely through. Please, just need to get out of the rain for a minute. Every logical part of Timothy's brain screamed at him, you have nothing. You can't help anyone. Tomorrow morning, this is all gone. Save what little you have left. Come in, Timothy heard himself say. Sit down. The old man shuffled forward, his movements slow and painful. Up close, his lips had a blue tint. This wasn't just cold. This was hypothermia setting in. Timothy moved to the back, toward what was left of the kitchen. His own stomach growled. He hadn't eaten in 48 hours. In the corner of the cooler, wrapped carefully in plastic, was one portion, his father's signature dish. He'd saved it for himself. One last meal before they tore this place down. One final taste of his father's legacy. His hand hovered over it, trembling. Then he was 10 years old again, watching his father cook for a homeless woman during the lunch rush. Feed the hungry, son, always. When someone walks through that door hungry, you feed them. No conditions, no questions. Timothy grabbed the ingredients.
He fired up the one working burner, the flame catching with a soft whoosh. He worked with reverence, searing the short ribs until they caramelized, building the layers of flavor his father had taught him. The aroma filled the space, rich, warm, achingly familiar. Before we continue, I need to tell you something. My mother said nobody would care about stories like Timothy's anymore, but I believe integrity still matters. If you think character still counts, hit that subscribe button. Now, let's see what happens next. 20 minutes later, Timothy placed the plate in front of him. Steam rose from the perfectly braised meat, his father's masterpiece, his last meal. "Eat," Timothy said softly. The old man's hands shook as he picked up the fork. He took a bite, closed his eyes, and tears began streaming down his weathered cheeks. As the old man ate, he spoke quietly between bites. "Been reading about medicine lately. Breakthroughs coming. Things that'll change everything." Timothy nodded, not understanding, just listening. The old man finished eating and looked up at Timothy. His eyes weren't hollow anymore. They were sharp, assessing. "Why? Why help me when you've lost everything?" Timothy glanced at his father's photo. "Because my father taught me that a man isn't defined by what he has, but by what he gives when he has nothing." The old man held his gaze for a long moment. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He pressed it into Timothy's hand, his fingers surprisingly strong. "Hold on to this. You're gonna need it tomorrow. 8 a.m. tomorrow. Don't leave before the show starts." And then he was gone, disappearing into the rain and darkness. Timothy unfolded the paper. Numbers, letters, some kind of stock symbol he didn't understand. Timothy couldn't sleep. At 7:23 a.m. he heard it, the rumble of heavy machinery. A massive demolition truck was backing into position. Behind it, 2 more vehicles, workers in hard hats, laughing, a police cruiser, and Bradley Hewitt's town car. Timothy stepped outside. Bradley smiled, that cold corporate smile. "We're running ahead of schedule, but I'm sure you don't mind." The foreman approached Bradley with a clipboard. "We're ready when you are, Mr. Hewitt. Just need your authorization." Bradley pulled out a pen with theatrical slowness, preparing to sign. Then Timothy heard it. Multiple engines, low and powerful, approaching from the south. 3 black SUVs rolled down the street in perfect formation, tinted windows reflecting the gray sky. The lead SUV pulled to a stop directly in front of the restaurant. Nobody moved. Bradley's smile faltered, his pen hovering above the authorization form. The driver opened the back door, and then, stepping out onto the pavement, was the old man. Except he wasn't old anymore. Gone was the threadbare coat. In its place, a tailored suit that probably cost more than Timothy's monthly revenue. His beard was neatly trimmed. His posture was straight, commanding. Behind him, 2 more figures emerged, a woman in a sharp pantsuit carrying a briefcase, a younger man with a tablet. They flanked the old man like generals flanking a commander. Bradley found his voice. "Excuse me, this is a restricted work zone." The old man raised one hand, not aggressive, just a simple gesture that carried absolute authority. Bradley's words died in his throat. The old man stopped directly in front of Timothy. "Mr. Matthews, I believe we have unfinished business." His voice was different, stronger,
refined, the kind of voice that commanded boardrooms. Bradley stepped forward. "I don't know who you think you are, but this property is being seized under legal authority. William R. Jackson, CEO of Jackson Holdings, retired." The name hit the crowd like a shock wave. Timothy heard gasps. William R. Jackson was a legend, the billionaire who'd built an empire from nothing. Forbes had called him the conscience of American business, and he'd been in Timothy's restaurant last night, eating the last meal Timothy had. "7 days ago, when this storm destroyed your neighborhood, I made a decision," William said. "I needed to know if there was still integrity here, still people who understood that wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in character. So I came here, dressed as a man with nothing. You gave me your last meal, your father's signature dish, without hesitation." The woman with the briefcase stepped forward, opening it with a crisp snap. She pulled out a thick folder. "This is impossible," Bradley stammered. "The bank is already authorized." "The bank no longer owns this property," William interrupted. "As of 6:47 this morning, I purchased the outstanding debt, the land beneath it, and actually the entire block, including the development contract your company thought it had secured." Bradley's face went pale. "You can't." "I can, and I did." The woman handed Timothy the folder. Inside were deeds, transfer papers, his name typed in official legal font. "The restaurant is yours, free and clear, no mortgage, no debt, and I'm prepared to invest $2 million in renovations and expansion." Timothy's knees buckled. William caught his arm, steadying him. "That stock symbol I gave you, RGEN, Regeneron Pharmaceuticals. They announced a breakthrough this morning, the medicine I mentioned. FDA fast-track approval. The stock jumped 47% in the first hour of trading." "Those shares I bought for you at $22, they're worth $32 now. That's $80,000 deposited into an account I opened in your name this morning, your seed capital for the rebuild." William's voice rose so the crowd could hear. "I don't just want to rebuild your restaurant. I want to build a black excellence business hub. 6 buildings on this block, your father's restaurant as the anchor, and I want you as lead partner, 51% ownership. This is your neighborhood, your vision." A woman in the crowd let out a sob. Others joined in. Tears, shouts, prayers lifted to the sky. Timothy's hand shook as he held the deed. "My father, he always said a man is defined by what he gives when he has nothing," William finished. "You lived it." Then, impossibly, the rain stopped. The clouds began to break apart, and through the gap, sunlight poured down, golden, warm, impossibly bright, illuminating the damaged building, Timothy's tear-streaked face. The crowd gasped. Someone shouted, "It's a sign!" William extended his hand. "So what do you say, partner? Ready to build something that matters?" Timothy gripped his hand, the deed pressed between their palms. "Yes, sir. Let's build it." The crowd erupted. People rushed forward, embracing Timothy, shaking William's hand. Bradley Hewitt stood frozen, watching his commission evaporate. William turned to him one final time. "Your development company had a contract with the previous ownership. That contract is now void. Consider this your official termination." Bradley's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. 6 months later, the restaurant gleamed. The cracked neon sign was gone, replaced by elegant brushed steel letters, "Matthews Legacy, established 1994. Grand opening night, and the line wrapped around the block. Mrs. Chin sat in the corner booth, dabbing her eyes. Your daddy would be so proud. On the wall where the eviction notice had once hung, there was now a framed photograph. Timothy and William, arms around each other's shoulders, both grinning. Below it, a brass plaque with his father's words engraved. At 8:47 p.m., a young woman slipped inside, early 20s, thin, her coat worn. She stood by the entrance, uncertain. Timothy saw her immediately. "Looking for a table?" he asked gently. She hesitated. I can't pay right now." Timothy smiled and pointed to the brass plaque on the wall. "The bill was paid 6 months ago by a man who was wetter than you." He guided her to a small table near the kitchen. "What's your name?" "Jessica," she whispered. "Jessica, I'm Timothy, and you're about to have the best meal of your life." He returned to the kitchen and started cooking, his father's signature dish, the same meal that had changed everything.
When he placed the plate in front of her, Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "I don't understand. Why would you?" "Because someone once taught me that this is what we do. We feed people. You matter, Jessica. Don't ever forget that." Timothy lost everything in the storm. The world told him his generosity was foolishness, that kindness was weakness. But when he gave his last meal to a stranger, he gained something no storm could ever destroy. He gained proof that his father was right. That character isn't tested when things are easy, but when you have nothing left to give and you give anyway. A man isn't defined by what he has. He's defined by what he gives when he has nothing. And sometimes, if you're willing to give everything, the universe gives back in ways that restore not just your circumstances, but your faith in humanity. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because your character is tested most when you have the least to give. The question isn't whether you'll face that test. The question is, when it comes, what will you choose? Timothy chose to feed a stranger, and in doing so, he fed his own soul in ways that money never could. What will you choose when your moment comes?